Captain Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what humans might call nervous laughter as he reviewed the surveillance footage for the 15th time. His 6 eyes, normally a vibrant purple indicating confidence among his species, had dulled to a worried gray. "She's still alive," whispered his communications officer, Lieutenant Zafira, her voice carrying the tremor of disbelief that had plagued their entire crew for the past 3 solar cycles. "Impossible," Vorthak muttered, though his conviction wavered with each word. "The shadow maw of Kepler 442b doesn't leave survivors. Ever. In 300 years of documented encounters, 0 survivors. 0. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Through the massive viewport, the emerald canopy of the jungle world stretched endlessly below their orbiting research vessel, the Stellar Inquiry. Somewhere down there, in that green hell where nightmares bred and evolved, a single human female continued to defy every law of survival their databases contained. "Sir," Zafira's voice cracked slightly, "the betting pools among the crew, they've reached astronomical levels. Half believe she'll be dead within the hour. The other half—" She paused, her gill slits fluttering with what could only be described as amazement. "The other half think she might actually make it to the extraction point." Vorthak's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Make it! Make it! Do you have any idea what's hunting her down there? The shadow maw isn't just some predator. It's the apex nightmare of an entire ecosystem designed by evolution's cruelest sense of humor." 3 days ago, Dr. Elena Vasquez had been part of a routine botanical survey team. Standard procedure: land, collect samples, return to orbit, file reports, collect pay. Simple, safe, boring even. Then the shadow maw had struck. Vorthak replayed the initial attack footage, his secondary stomach churning at the familiar scene. The creature had emerged from what appeared to be solid ground, its adaptive camouflage so perfect that even their advanced sensors hadn't detected it until too late. 8 meters long, covered in chitinous plates that shifted color like liquid metal, with jaws that could crack starship hull plating. The other 7 team members hadn't even had time to scream. But Elena Vasquez? Oh, she'd surprised everyone. Instead of freezing in terror like any sensible being, she'd done something so utterly unexpected that Vorthak still couldn't quite believe it actually happened. She'd laughed. Not a scream, not a cry for help, not even a curse in one of those colorful human languages. She'd actually laughed as her companions were being torn apart around her. Then, with a casual stride that would have made a Centaurian battle monk weep with envy, she'd walked to the nearest tree and started examining it. "Replay section, Gamma 77, Vorthak commanded, his voice hoarse. The holographic display shimmered, showing Elena, crouched beside a massive ironbark tree, running her fingers along its surface while chaos erupted mere meters away. Her dark hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and her standard-issue explorer's gear showed no signs of panic or haste. "Computer, enhance audio from this timestamp." The bridge speakers crackled to life with Elena's voice, calm and conversational as if she were discussing the weather. "Huh. Interesting grain pattern. Definitely dense enough. Yeah, this'll do nicely." Lieutenant Zafira's gill slits flapped in bewilderment. "Sir, what exactly was she doing?" "According to our xenobiological experts," Vorthak replied, his tone dry as desert sand, "she was apparently shopping for raw materials, like she was at some sort of hardware store." The footage continued. While the Shadow Maw finished its grisly work with the survey team, Elena had begun what could only be described as the most relaxed emergency crafting session in recorded galactic history. Using nothing but a standard-issue multi-tool and what appeared to be an almost supernatural understanding of wood grain and tensile strength, she'd begun carving. "Fast forward to the completion phase," Vorthak ordered. The hologram jumped ahead 2 hours. Elena stood, brushing wood shavings from her hands with the satisfaction of a job well done. In her grip was what humans called a bow, though calling it merely a bow was like calling a supernova merely bright. The weapon she'd crafted was a work of art that would have made master weaponsmiths across the galaxy weep with jealousy. The curve was mathematically perfect, the string woven from some kind of vine fiber she'd harvested and processed in minutes. And the arrows. Oh, the arrows were something special. How did she even know how to make those? Zafira asked, pointing at the display. Vorthak's mandibles clicked again, this time in grudging admiration. According to her personnel file, Dr. Elena Vasquez spent her childhood on Terra's North American continent, specifically in what they call Montana. Apparently, her grandfather taught her something called traditional archery as a hobby. A hobby? Zafira's voice pitched higher. She's using a hobby to survive against the most dangerous predator in this sector? It gets better, Vorthak said, though his tone suggested better might not be the right word. Cross-reference her educational background. The display shifted, showing Elena's academic credentials. Doctorate in Xenobotany from the Terran Institute, specializing in adaptive plant behaviors and emergency botanical applications. Master's in survival biology. Minor in applied physics. She didn't just randomly pick that tree, Vorthak continued, his voice taking on the reverent tone usually reserved for discussing cosmic phenomena. She selected that specific species because she understood, instinctively, exactly which properties she needed. The wood's density, flexibility, moisture content, grain, structure. She processed more botanical data in those 2 hours than our computers manage in a full analysis cycle. The current footage showed Elena moving through the jungle with the fluid grace of a born predator. She'd somehow managed to remain completely clean, despite 3 days in what was essentially a humid, muddy, insect-infested green nightmare. Her bow was always at the ready, and those impossible arrows seemed to find their mark no matter how impossible the shot. "Status report on the Shadow Maw," Vorthak commanded. Ensign Korath, their tracking specialist, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, the creature has been following her for 3 days now, always maintaining a distance of approximately 200 meters. Following her?" Zafira's gills fluttered in confusion. "Why isn't it attacking?" "Because," Vorthak said slowly, the realization dawning on him with the force of a meteor impact. "It's not hunting her anymore. She's hunting IT." The bridge erupted in startled exclamations and chittering protests. The idea was absurd, impossible, contrary to everything they knew about apex predators and prey dynamics. But the evidence was undeniable. "Computer, analyze movement patterns of both subjects over the past 72 hours. The display showed 2 tracking lines weaving through the jungle. The Shadow Maw's path, displayed in red, showed increasingly erratic patterns, sudden direction changes, doubling back, seeking shelter in increasingly desperate locations. Elena's path, shown in blue, was methodical, purposeful, patient. "She's herding it," Korath whispered, his voice filled with awe. "She's herding the most dangerous predator on this planet," Vorthak confirmed, his own voice hollow with disbelief. "Like it's some kind of livestock." The current surveillance feed showed Elena setting up what could only be described as a trap. She'd found a clearing where several game trails converged, and was methodically preparing her position. Multiple arrows were stuck point first into the ground within easy reach. Her bow was strung and ready, but it was her expression that sent chills down Vorthak's chitin-covered spine. She was smiling. Not the desperate grin of someone facing death with false bravery, not the manic expression of someone who'd snapped under pressure. This was the calm, satisfied smile of a professional doing what she did best. "Sir," Zafira said quietly, "I'm reading massive movement in the jungle canopy. The shadow maw it's approaching her position." "Sound general quarters," Vorthak ordered. "All sensors on maximum gain. I want every detail recorded." The jungle around Elena's position erupted into unnatural silence. Even the insects seemed to sense what was coming. The ambient noise that had provided constant background chatter for days suddenly died, leaving only the whisper of wind through leaves and Elena's steady breathing. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even seem particularly concerned. Instead, she began to hum. Is she humming?" Korath asked, his voice cracking. "According to the audio analysis," Zafira reported, "it's an ancient Terran song called Ring of Fire. Historical context suggests it was popular among humans who engaged in dangerous activities for recreation." "Recreation?" Vorthak repeated flatly. "She's treating this like recreation." The Shadowmaw's approach was poetry in motion, despite its size. 8 meters of perfectly evolved killing machine moving through the undergrowth with supernatural silence. Its chameleonic skin shifted through a dozen different patterns per second, making it nearly impossible to track visually. Nearly impossible for anyone except Elena, apparently. Without breaking her humming or even looking in the creature's direction, she reached down and plucked one of her handcrafted arrows from the ground. In a single, fluid motion that would have made physics professors weep, she knocked the arrow, drew the bowstring, and fired. The arrow disappeared into apparently empty jungle. A heartbeat later, the most terrifying roar in the known galaxy echoed across the clearing. "Direct hit," Korath reported, his voice strangled with disbelief. How did she even see it? Elena's laugh drifted up through their audio pickups, warm and genuine. "Gotcha! You big, ugly son of a gun!" The shadow maw burst from concealment, its adaptive camouflage failing as pain and rage overrode its nervous system. Elena's arrow protruded from what their database indicated was a major muscle group in the creature's left shoulder. Not a killing shot, but definitely one that would limit its mobility. And apparently, that had been entirely intentional. "She's playing with it," Vorthak breathed. "She's actually playing with the apex predator of an entire planet." Elena nocked a second arrow, but instead of firing immediately, she began to move. Her footwork was precise, economical, keeping her positioned so that fallen logs and tree trunks provided cover, while maintaining clear firing lanes. The shadow maw lunged, its massive form covering the distance with terrifying speed. But Elena was no longer where she'd been standing. The creature's claws raked empty air as she rolled behind a massive root system, came up with her bow drawn, and put a second arrow into its right flank. Another roar. More rage, less coordination. "The arrows!" Zafira said suddenly. "Sir, I'm detecting trace amounts of organic compounds on the arrowheads. She's been coating them with something." "Something?" Vorthak demanded. "Neurotoxin, sir. Extracted from the local flora. It's not lethal, but it's affecting the creature's reaction time and motor control." Elena popped up from behind a different tree entirely, somehow having crossed 20 meters of open ground without being seen. Her third arrow took the shadow maw in the left rear leg. "This is impossible," Korath muttered. "She's not even breathing hard. Indeed, Elena's respiration remained steady and controlled. If anything, she seemed to be enjoying herself more with each passing minute. Her movements had the casual confidence of someone who'd done this exact thing 1,000 times before, which, according to her file, she had, just not with 8-meter alien death machines. "Montana deer," Vorthak said suddenly. "Sir?" Zafira asked. Her file mentions hunting Montana deer as a child. Apparently, they're elusive prey that require patience, skill, and intimate knowledge of forest environments. "Sir," Korath interrupted, "the Shadowmaw it's retreating." On the display, the massive predator was indeed backing away from Elena, its movements increasingly unsteady as the neurotoxin took effect. 3 arrows protruded from strategic locations, and its earlier confidence had been replaced by something that looked suspiciously like caution. Elena lowered her bow and took a step forward. The Shadowmaw took 2 steps back. She took another step. It retreated again. "She's established dominance," Vorthak said, his voice hollow. "Over a Shadowmaw, with a bow she made from a tree." Elena seemed to consider her options, then reached for a 4th arrow. But instead of knocking it, she held it casually at her side and began walking toward the creature with the calm confidence of someone approaching a nervous pet. The Shadowmaw, apex predator of Kepler, 442b, terror of the jungle, nightmare of evolution, whined, like a scolded puppy. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," Zafira whispered. Elena stopped just outside the creature's striking range and said something that their audio pickups couldn't quite catch. Her tone was conversational, almost gentle. The Shadowmaw's massive head tilted slightly, like it was actually listening. Then Elena did something that would haunt Vorthak's dreams for cycles to come. She sat down, cross-legged, completely relaxed, her bow laid across her knees. She sat down in front of the most dangerous predator in this sector of the galaxy, like she was having a picnic. "Ma'am," she said, her voice now clearly audible through their sensors, "you and I need to have a conversation." The Shadowmaw, still standing, still capable of killing her in about a dozen different ways, made a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a rumble. Elena nodded as if she understood perfectly. I know, she continued. "Your territory, your rules. But here's the thing. My friends died, and that makes me cranky. And when I get cranky, I do things that probably aren't in anyone's best interest." She gestured to the arrows embedded in the creature's hide. "Now, I could keep playing pin the tail on the nightmare beast until you decide to take a nice long nap. Or," she paused dramatically, "we could discuss this like civilized beings." The Shadowmaw made another sound, this one distinctly puzzled. "Oh, you can understand me just fine," Elena said with a grin that was equal parts charming and terrifying. "My xenobiology professors would have kittens if they knew. But apex predators don't get to be apex predators by being stupid. You've been observing human behavior for decades, haven't you? Learning our patterns, our weaknesses, our technology." The creature's massive head nodded once. Actually nodded. "Thought so," Elena continued. "Smart girl. But here's what you didn't account for. Not all humans are the same. Most of us? Yeah, we're soft, slow, dependent on our gadgets and our teamwork. Easy prey." She stood up in one fluid motion, her bow coming up with her but remaining unthreatening. "But some of us grew up different. Some of us learned that the universe is a dangerous place, and the only way to survive it is to be more dangerous than it is." The Shadowmaw took another step backward. "Now," Elena said, her voice taking on the tone of a patient teacher, I'm going to walk out of your jungle. You're not going to follow me. You're not going to hunt any more survey teams. And in exchange, I won't come back here and turn you into the galaxy's most expensive handbag." She paused, tilting her head thoughtfully. "Deal?" The bridge of the stellar inquiry had fallen completely silent. Even the background hum of the life support system seemed muted. The Shadow Maw, apex predator extraordinaire, looked at Elena for a long moment. Then it turned and melted back into the jungle without another sound. Elena watched it go, then looked up at the sky with a knowing smile. "Extraction coordinates are in my emergency beacon," she called out, apparently addressing their orbiting ship directly. "I'll be waiting at the primary landing site. And Captain Vorthak, next time you want to study dangerous wildlife, maybe bring someone who actually knows how to handle dangerous wildlife." She shouldered her bow and began walking through the jungle with the casual confidence of someone taking a stroll through a pleasant park. "How did she know my name?" Vorthak whispered. "Sir," Zephyra said slowly, "I think that might be the least of our concerns right now." As Elena disappeared into the green shadows of the jungle, heading toward their agreed extraction point, Vorthak found himself faced with a realization that would change everything he thought he knew about human beings. Dr. Elena Vasquez hadn't survived the jungle. She'd conquered it. And she'd made it look easy. 2 hours later, Captain Vorthak stood in the shuttle bay, watching his crew prepare for what should have been a routine extraction. Should have been. Nothing about Elena Vasquez qualified as routine anymore. "Landing zone is secure," reported Pilot Nexus, her voice crackling through the comm system. "No signs of hostile activity. Subject is, sir, she's built a campfire." "She's what?" Vorthak's mandibles clicked so hard they nearly cracked. "Built a campfire, sir. She's sitting beside it, roasting what appears to be some kind of local fruit." She waved when she saw our shuttle. Lieutenant Zephyra, who had insisted on joining the extraction team despite regulations, adjusted her field gear nervously. "Sir, are we certain she's the same human who was attacked 3 days ago?" Vorthak studied the real-time feed from the shuttle's sensors. Elena sat peacefully beside an expertly constructed fire, her bow leaning against a nearby tree. She'd apparently spent her time waiting for extraction by setting up what could only be described as a comfortable outdoor living space. A lean-to shelter constructed from jungle materials, a water collection system using broad leaves, and yes, she was indeed roasting what their botanical scanners identified as a highly nutritious local fruit. "She's turned a survival situation into a camping trip," he muttered. "Of course she has." The shuttle touched down in the clearing with practiced precision. Elena stood, shouldered her bow, and walked toward them with the relaxed gait of someone boarding public transportation. "Dr. Vasquez," Vorthak called out as she approached. "Are you injured? Do you require medical attention?" Elena grinned, and Vorthak noticed her teeth were remarkably white and sharp-looking. "Captain, good to finally meet you in person." "I'm fine, thanks. Had a lovely few days, actually. This planet's got some fascinating botanical diversity." She gestured toward her makeshift camp. "The fruit here is incredible. Tastes like a cross between Terran mangoes and something I can't quite identify. High in protein, too, which is unusual for fruit. And the timber quality?" She patted her bow affectionately. "Absolutely superb. I might put in a request to catalog this world for sustainable resource development." Zephyra's gill slits flapped in bewilderment. "Dr. Vasquez, you were stalked by a shadow maw for 3 days, the most dangerous predator in this sector." "Stalked?" Elena laughed, a sound like silver bells mixed with barely contained chaos. "Oh, honey, no. I was conducting a behavioral modification session. Big difference. She climbed aboard the shuttle with casual ease, stowing her bow in the overhead compartment like any other piece of luggage. Though I have to say, your files on the Shadow Maw were way off. They're not mindless killing machines at all. Highly intelligent, actually. Probably smarter than half the species in the Galactic Council. Vorthak settled into his seat across from her, studying this impossible human with the intensity of a scientist examining a new form of matter. Dr. Vasquez, according to our records, Shadow Maws have killed over 300 sentient beings in documented encounters. How exactly did you modify its behavior? Elena accepted a standard nutrition pack from Ensign Korath, who was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Simple psychology, really. Establish clear boundaries, consistent consequences, and mutual respect. Same principles you'd use with any intelligent creature. You used psychology, Zafira said slowly. On a monster. Not a monster, Elena corrected gently. Just misunderstood. Think about it from her perspective. She cracked open the nutrition pack and took a bite, making a face. Ugh, you really need to upgrade your field rations. Anyway, from her perspective, these soft alien creatures keep wandering into her territory, making noise, disrupting her hunting patterns. Of course, she's going to defend her space. The shuttle lifted off smoothly, beginning its ascent toward the stellar inquiry. Through the viewports, the jungle canopy spread below them like an emerald ocean. So you decided to negotiate? Vorthak asked. I decided to speak her language, Elena said. And her language is strength, territory, and respect. Once I demonstrated that I wasn't easy prey, that I could match her skill for skill, she was willing to listen. Korath, who had been silent during the entire exchange, finally found his voice. Dr. Vasquez, forgive me, but how? How did you know any of this would work? How were you so calm when your entire team was being killed around you? Elena's expression shifted, becoming more serious. For the first time since they'd met her, she seemed to actually consider her words carefully. Ensign Korath, right? She waited for his nod. Tell me, where are you from? Centauri Prime, ma'am, the capital city. Safe place? Very safe. Climate-controlled, automated defense systems, predictive crime prevention algorithms. Elena nodded. I grew up in a place called Montana, Earth's North American continent, specifically about 50 kilometers from the nearest neighbor, in what my species calls bear country. She leaned back in her seat, her eyes taking on a distant quality. When I was 7 years old, I was walking to our storage shed when I came face to face with a full-grown grizzly bear. Nearly 3 meters tall when it stood up, claws longer than my fingers, jaws that could crack my skull like an egg. The shuttle had gone completely quiet except for the hum of engines. My grandfather found me 20 minutes later, sitting cross-legged about 2 meters from this bear, having what appeared to be a conversation with it. The bear was lying down, relaxed, listening to me tell it about my pet rabbit. Zafira's voice was barely a whisper. What did your grandfather do? He sat down next to me and waited for our conversation to finish. When the bear got bored and wandered off, he looked at me and said, Elena, most folks would have run screaming or tried to fight that bear. Either way would have gotten them killed. But you did something smarter. You recognized that it was just curious, not aggressive, and you treated it with respect. Elena smiled at the memory. That was my first lesson in what humans call reading the room. Understanding that every dangerous situation has multiple possible outcomes, and the outcome you get depends entirely on how you choose to engage with it. Vorthak was frantically taking notes on his personal data pad. This was the kind of information that xenopsychologists would pay fortunes to access. "So, when the Shadow Maw attacked your team," he said carefully, "you were reading the situation?" "Exactly." Elena pulled out a small device that Vorthak recognized as a standard field recorder. I noticed several things immediately. First, the attack was surgical, precise. No wasted motion, no excessive violence. That told me this wasn't a creature driven by bloodlust or hunger. This was territorial defense. She activated the recorder, and audio filled the shuttle. The sounds of the initial attack, but now with Elena providing commentary. "Listen here," she said, pointing to a specific timestamp. "The Shadow Maw had multiple opportunities to kill me. I was standing right there, completely exposed, but it ignored me initially." "Why?" Korath leaned forward. "Why?" "Because I wasn't running. Every other member of my team either fled or froze in terror. Classic prey responses. But I just stood there, watching. From the Shadow Maw's perspective, I was displaying either alpha behavior or complete insanity. Either way, I became interesting rather than threatening." The recording continued, and they could hear Elena's voice, calm and analytical, as she examined the ironbark tree. "Phase 2 of my plan," she continued, "demonstrate capability without direct confrontation. By crafting the bow, I was showing that I possessed skills and knowledge that made me potentially dangerous. But I wasn't using those skills aggressively. I was preparing, but not attacking." Zephyra shook her head in amazement. "You planned all this? While your teammates were being killed?" Elena's expression grew cold for just a moment. "Lieutenant, I've been in dangerous situations since I was old enough to walk. My grandfather taught me that grief and panic are luxuries you can't afford when your life is on the line. You mourn the dead after you've ensured you won't be joining them." The shuttle docked with the Stellar Inquiry with barely a vibration. As they prepared to disembark, Vorthak found himself facing a question that had been nagging at him since this entire situation began. "Dr. Vasquez, one more thing. How did you know my name? We never transmitted personal information." Elena's grin returned, equal parts charming and terrifying. "Captain, I've been monitoring your communications since day one. Your crew isn't exactly subtle about their betting pools. Plus, standard hegemony protocol requires the commanding officer to monitor extraction operations personally. Simple deduction." She gathered her gear and headed toward the airlock. "Oh, and Captain? You might want to update your xenobiology databases. I recorded about 40 hours of Shadow Maw behavioral data. Should be useful for future survey teams." As she walked away, Vorthak realized he had one more question. "Dr. Vasquez." He called out. "What happens now? Do you plan to return to routine botanical surveys?" Elena paused at the airlock door and looked back at him. Her smile had changed again, becoming something that made Vorthak's chitin crawl with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. "Captain," she said, "after spending 3 days negotiating with the apex predator of an alien world, using nothing but a bow I carved from a tree, and psychological principles I learned from my grand, do you really think I'm going to be satisfied with routine botanical surveys?" She disappeared through the airlock, leaving the extraction team standing in stunned silence. "Sir," Zephyra said eventually, "what do we put in our report?" Vorthak looked at his notes, at the recorder full of impossible footage, at the behavioral data that would revolutionize their understanding of human psychology. "The truth," he said finally, "though I doubt anyone will believe it." 3 days later, Elena Vasquez submitted her resignation from the Botanical Survey Division and transferred to the hegemony's newly formed Department of Extreme Environment Operations. Her application was approved within hours. Her first assignment? Leading a contact team to negotiate with the crystalline hive mind of Proxima 7, a species that had successfully resisted diplomatic contact for over 2 centuries by systematically destroying every ship that entered their system. When asked why she'd accepted such a dangerous assignment, Elena's response became legendary throughout the hegemony's diplomatic corps. Because somebody needs to teach the galaxy that humans don't just survive impossible situations, we make them better. Captain Vorthak, who had requested to lead the support fleet for Elena's mission, filed his final report with a single addendum that would be quoted in xenopsychology textbooks for generations. Recommendation: when dealing with humans, especially those from locations designated as Bear Country, expect the impossible. Then expect them to exceed it. The Shadow Maw of Kepler, 442b, for its part, became something of a local celebrity. Survey teams began reporting friendly encounters with the creature, who seemed to have appointed itself as an unofficial guide for visitors who demonstrated appropriate respect for its territory. And sometimes, just sometimes, explorers would find carefully carved wooden arrows embedded in trees along the safe paths through the jungle. Not as warnings, but as gifts. A reminder that the most dangerous human in the galaxy had once walked these trails and made them safer for everyone who came after. Elena Vasquez had not just survived the jungle. She had improved it.